So I think we can start. Good morning, everyone, especially to our panelists, and of course to all the audience, students, academics, and industry representatives joining us on YouTube, where we are live streaming today's webinar. My name is Emil Juvan. I'm a staff member at the University of Primorska, Faculty of Tourism Studies, Turistica, and I'll be moderating, hosting this event. Before giving the floor to our panelists, I would like to give a brief outline of today's webinar, which rests on the topic of the World Tourism Day 2021, which was dedicated or is still dedicated to tourism for inclusive growth, which celebrates, as the United Nations World Tourism Organization said, tourism's unique ability to ensure that nobody is left behind as the world begins to open up again and look for the future. I believe that this statement actually inevitably calls for future tourism to genuinely become sustainable and open to the needs of our natural environment and, of course, to our people. Today's online panel will discuss how academia can help achieving inclusive growth through tourism, and we will specifically focus on the international academic and industry collaboration. But before moving to our panelists, I wish to welcome also Dr. Miha Lesjak. He is the Vice Dean for International and Business Relations at the Faculty of Tourism Studies, Turistica. And dear Miha, can you please add a few words about this event, thus putting it into the wider context, please?
Yeah, good morning to everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you, Emil, for giving me the word. Yeah, the broad context is definitely connected to the 25 years of existence of the Faculty of Tourism Studies, Turistica. And this last event, the sixth event, is international event, which we are super proud that we can host it after 5 events, which we did in Slovenia with the Slovenian tourism industry, sharing the future of tourism last year. So Turistica celebrated 25 years in 2020. That's a huge success for us, to be able to share knowledge, research projects in Slovenia and worldwide, as a tourism of faculty studies. So today's Turistica is with the title Co-Creating Tourism Knowledge and International Academic Networking Perspective, is the cherry on the cake of 5 events. And we are super happy that we have our friends, our panelists today, with those who we are cooperating for many years. And today we will try to present also some of the results of this cooperation. International cooperation is really important. It's important for sharing the knowledge, for gaining new knowledge, and to transfer this knowledge to the industry, to students, and to the other audiences which are involved in our tourism industry. So in that case, I would just like to say that wish you a good debate today, and Emil, the Zoom is now yours.
Thank you, Miha. I wish to welcome also my dear panelists, world's leading academics in their respective fields. They have vast experiences in international collaboration, and they've also contributed majorly to tourism knowledge needed for making tourism more sustainable. They also continue being active in delivering this knowledge through their scientific publications, industry collaborations, and teaching. So let me welcome Professor Sangbong Park from Kyunghee University from Korea, my dear Professor Sarah Donichar from the University of Queensland, Australia, Professor Elizabeth Eineson from Manchester Metropolitan University, UK, and Associate Professor Miroslav Vujicic from University of Novi Sad, Republic of Serbia. I do have to apologize on behalf of 2 panelists, Professor James Scannell from Greenwich University, UK, and Professor Vanja Pavlukovic from University of Novi Sad, because they had to cancel their participation due to health reasons last minute. So it's going to be 4 of us, nicely gender balanced panel. But I also wish to welcome all the students who have joined us live stream on YouTube, and also all the academics and industry representatives who will be watching even this afterwards. I hope that whatever we deliver today will have an impact on their thinking, on how they can collaborate with the academics, and how they can actually uptake the knowledge that academics develop. and it's aimed actually to improve their performance and making tourism more sustainable. Thank you also to Angers. He's at the background, our technical assistant, who will be assisting us and actually delivering any questions that anyone from YouTube would like to ask our panelists. So Angers, thank you for this support. I think I also need to give a short introduction to how we're going to conduct today's webinar. So it's going to be set up in 4 sections. First, I will give the floor to our panelists and ask them to talk about their key contributions to tourism knowledge and to development of tourism industry. Then we will move on to discussing, the key knowledge that the key things that we know and the key things that we do not know in the respective fields that is covered by the 4 panelists. And the last 2 sections will basically be like a casual conversation. I will be asking questions which I believe they're relevant for bringing this webinar to some useful conclusions in relation to improving our international academic networks and thus improving our knowledge on tourism and making it more sustainable. So I think we're all set. I will give the floor now to Professor Park. Can you please shortly describe your work, your key contributions to tourism knowledge, and your international academic networks affiliations, please?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Yeah, let me introduce myself first. Actually, I prepared my own slides. Please share video myself. Okay, I believe everyone can see my presentation here. Yeah, thanks, Emil, for inviting me this great opportunity to share some research insights and then my research experience with you guys. My name is Sang-won Park, as you can see here. So I'm a professor at the Kyung University in South Korea. And then before that, I used to work in the Hong Kong Booking University and then at the University of Surrey before I joining the Hong Kong. Actually, I believe that I would be able to address the question from Emil, how I developed my research interests and collaborations in the little bit next part when I really talk about my research areas. But briefly, so from, I actually even though started from the South Korean originality and then my nationality there, but I was able to have a study in US and then work in UK, Hong Kong, now in Korea back. So I was able to build up my international collaborations from my study and working places. At the same time, here's my research interest. My research interest show that big data and then artificial intelligence. So with my advisor, who is Professor Daniel Fesenmeyer, I was able to understand the fundamental of information technology in tourism. And then based upon that, I actually developed my research area in travel mobility, pattern recognition using the data, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and then with the digital and mobile marketing. And then actually briefly, I have my own homepage here at www.drsangwonpark.com, which is here. Yeah, here is that. So actually, I already made all the project and the research collaborations, which is outcomes, how I made the contributions. The both of them are provided in a more video format or more visualized format. So I believe that if you're interested in my research area in more detail, you can go to check and then you can find more interest from that. Okay, again, thanks for inviting me. This is interesting workshop. Then let me have more detail, such a context in the next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Park. Let's move on to Sarah. So Sarah, how would you present your knowledge contributions and your international network to our audience?
Well, I've had the luxury of pursuing all sorts of things. I actually believe as a researcher, you have to reinvent yourself regularly, otherwise it gets boring. So I started off with market segmentation analysis, which was a very statistical problem. It wasn't at all content oriented, and that's probably still what people know me. And I've done some 20 years of that. So I'm thoroughly over now. Don't ask me now to collaborate on market segmentation analysis anymore. I've done quite a few things out of tourism, actually. I won't talk about that. I've, for a little while, developed a keen interest in peer-to-peer accommodation. And that keen interest was driven by the fact that peer-to-peer accommodation works so differently from everything else we knew before. Just in terms of, think about just the fact that you have to ask permission to stay in tourist accommodation. I mean, how fascinating, right? So basically, no hotel would ever say, no, we have a vacancy, but we are not letting you stay. But in Airbnb, that's the norm. So I got quite fascinated with that. Then I got bored with it. And then I got re-fascinated when COVID came, because that was a total game changer. But my main research program is about environmental sustainability. It's not only about tourism. It's about consumers in hedonic spaces, consumers in spaces where they are focused on their enjoyment. And obviously, vacations play a big part in this. And so what we're trying to do is we're developing a new theory currently, because we think that current theories of human behavior don't really capture what people do in hedonic spaces. And we are running a whole series of field experiments. I'll talk about a few of them, and some of them were with Emil in Slovenia, where we're trying to really develop and empirically test measures to make tourism more sustainable.
Thank you, Sarah. Let's move on to Professor Elizabeth Arneson from Manchester Metropolitan University. How can you summarize your key contributions and interests in terms of research and collaborations internationally? Because I know you also have a lot of experiences in this field.
Yes, where do I start? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm a visiting research fellow at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'm also the operations manager for La Fondation pour la Formation Hôtelière, where I organise industry education links management seminars in 28 partner institutions in 19 Central and Eastern European countries. Obviously, since the pandemic, I've not been doing face-to-face seminars, but I have done some virtual ones. I oversaw the development of a Manchester Met validated MSc course in International Hotel and Tourism Management at the University Centre Caesar Ritz in Switzerland in the early 2000s, and I was a visiting professor there for about 15 years. I advised on staff development as well as teaching. I was awarded an honorary professorship by Budapest Business School, and I'm currently a visiting professor at the National Kaohsiung University of Hospitality and Tourism in Taiwan. In 2020, I identified a knowledge gap for inclusive growth. There were numerous reported unethical hospitality and tourism practices globally, and these affected stakeholders, including employees, companies, local communities, travellers, etc. And I perceived a need for education in this field. So although I've published more than 200 papers, I beg your pardon. I wish I had done 2,000, but life is too short. And I've edited 13 books of case studies because I favour experiential learning and I use them for teaching. My current focus is on teaching hospitality and tourism ethics, and I do this through experiential learning.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for now. I'm sure we'll get back to all these later on. And last but not least, Miroslav from University of Novi Sad, please, the Zoom is yours to give your presentation on your key contributions, key interests, and international collaborations, please.
Thank you, Emil. So good morning to you all, or good afternoon in different time zones. So first of all, I would like to thank Emil and Miha to reaching out to me and inviting me in this great panel. It's a real pleasure. So my name is Miroslav Vujčić. I come from the University of Novi Sad, Faculty of Sciences. And as Sarah said, well, we reinvent ourselves. So we start to enter in one field and switch to another, as tourism is a really, really complex area of research. And I started mostly first as the cultural tourism and heritage management research, then switched to some evaluation models where I applied some statistical and mathematical models for evaluation, then switched to impact assessment, as I will connect it a little bit further to projects we do here at the faculty. And also I research in the project management field connected to the projects, and also in the geotourism field. Besides being a faculty professor, I'm also involved, like Miha, in international project and international mobility. And this is something which has really been valuable to me in my expanding my networks and making connection, not just in the tourism field, but I ventured outside the tourism field and connected to different industries. And also I've been a part of, I call it in family, it's a family, International Tourism Studies Association, and I will talk a little bit later in my presentation about that and about the value of being part of such a network. So I will try to focus mostly, not too much on the research, but what research and my field of interest brought to me in terms of international cooperation and connections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Miroslav. This is exactly what we wanted for today's webinar. Now that we all know a little bit more about our panelists, I think it's time for them to present the key knowledge, existing knowledge, and the key knowledge gaps they believe exist in their respective fields. So first, I would like to give floor to Professor Park to talk about smart tourism and technology in the service of achieving an inclusive growth of our society to tourism. As I mentioned at the beginning, this will be kind of a typical presentation, monologue, if you want, for all the audience. And I'm sure that everybody will use their PowerPoints to kind of summarize and support their thoughts on the respective fields. So Professor Park, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Emil. I believe that now everyone can see my presentation material here. Actually, the title is a little bit revised, but I think it didn't really accommodate well. But actually, what I'm going to talk about today is smart tourism and big data. Data particularly, rather than talking about overall technology, which is quite too broad to me. And then why is it smart tourism? So I believe that those students or academic or industry people in tourism hospitality industry, you may hear or listen to a lot of people talking about data, technology, and smart tourism itself. So smart tourism, such the concept that with the advancement of technology, we are able to such accommodate lots of data and a variety of data. That from here, so we also have a development infrastructure in tourism field, that when we integrate those new resources, we can bring them into the tourism field so that we can propose new way of understanding tourism. So we call it smart tourism. So in this sense, today I'm particularly talking about data, how data has been used in smart tourism field. When you get the existing literature, there are lots of studies already have been done to estimate the travel demand. For example, how many tourist arrivals coming into our city, state, or country. And then we also very accurately or in an advanced way to forecast how many people we're going to visit our destination in near future. Arrivals have been done. But what we still didn't know, that still the understanding, the structures of travel flow and patterns are still quite limited. Let me give you one example. Here are the South Korea cases. When you look at the left side, this is quite generic travel forecasting research. So by the time goes, we can see how the change of demand accordingly, we can predict in the future, or how much of forecasted tourist arrivals. On the right side, 2019, before Corona, we have the 70 million people have visited South Korea. Okay, so with a clear status there. Then we need to ask a question, then where do they visit? In which pattern they have visited while they're visiting South Korea? We have a simple statistic. And look at the table, 78% people have visited Seoul, which is the capital of South Korea. 18% people have visited Busan, southeast part over here. And the 11% people have visited Jeju Island. Is that enough for the insight of travel mobility in South Korea? Not necessarily. We are not quite sure. People only visit 3 cities when they visit South Korea. And which pattern they have moved through. Why we haven't really clarified that? One reason is very limited data. We can find out the core fundamental idea from it. Because basically how they collect this data, KTO, Korea Tourism Organization, they conduct a survey from the tourists before they're leaving the airport. They're asking them, can you please provide all the destinations you have visited? But you know that human brain have a limited capability. We are not able to memorize every single place where we have visited. So they provide only 2, 3 different destinations. Does it really mean that people have visited only 3 cities when they visit the country? Not really. So in that case, with the advancement of connected technology, this allows tourism researchers to obtain more accurate data to understand where they visit, what's their travel activities. One of the example, mobile technology, everyone bring their own smartphones here. They have a location-based service system here. Keep constantly communicating with a satellite or a phone tower so that we can have a full trajectory information over travel behaviors. With the credit card data, with social media data, we can see exact travel activities, their consumption behaviors, as well as their travel experiences from textual data. So once we have a big data from this connected technology, integrate traditional travel mobility, we can propose new idea of smart travel mobility. Why this is important to understand it? Then once we have this smart travel mobility, we can propose data-based decision-making process. In other words, in evidence-based decision-making process, and this will help us to make the better planning of our destination to develop such a destination management. As a result, we can develop tourism-focused recommendation system. What is important? After COVID-19, I believe that most people becoming more individual travel behavior pattern will show up. Then this recommendation system can provide a more customized, personalized services based upon big data so that we can enhance travel behavior experiences. And then this recommendation system help us to distribute over travel demand to the all different regions so that we can reduce crowdedness. Then somehow it can help some solution to leverage, to such a resolve the over tourism issues in future so that we can improve the quality of residential places at the destinations. So let me give you some example. So once you have a big data, how does it look like, the big data? Mobile sensor data from here, they keep sending the signal with the phone tower. We have 2 different information. One, where they visit as a latitude and longitude. With the base of phone tower location or satellite, we can find out exactly where they are. And then additionally, we can find out when they visit the place, where they visit, when they visit, how long they visit those certain places. Once we have we don't need to bring their smartphone, we can have a full trajectory when they visit one country, state, or certain city. From here, first of all, we can identify where are hot places from the big data analytics. As a result, we can develop, we can shed light on there are certain movement patterns from this such a big data perspective. At the end, we can propose evidence-based destination planning, which means flow-based destination planning. When DMs plan their destination, we don't really have to have a more intuitive decision, but we can have a more data-based decision-making process. And then almost the end, so we also tried some with the big data research with the one island, in Jeju Island, biggest island in South Korea, with the pandemic. But in South Korea, we don't have any lockdown. People can move any places whenever they want. But one destination, they're really scared of having some spreading of COVID-19 virus. They have to make the pandemic prevention strategy. How they make the strategy? Of course, our research team help them to have a more systematic strategy based upon the big data by identifying hot places, movement pattern, their travel activities based upon navigation card data. This is what we can have so that from the big data in tourism, we can make a more impactful research to the destination. Only the practical research? Not necessarily. Based on the big data, I was able to make the top tier journals here, not in the tourism field, but also the tourism knowledge can contribute into the different field as well. For example, geography and also American Association of Geographers, top journal in geography. And then these knowledge also can make the contributions to computer science or urban engineering, urban system with the coming into all the field discipline. How does it happen? As Emil, and that the focus of this workshop is that network, academic industry network is critical. In those research papers, all the collaboration, I'm the only tourism researcher. All my collaborators, as are coming from geography, computer science, applied physics, urban engineering, all the other places. This is very likely interdisciplinary approach. So when I look at the tourism with the data, my angle, my vision is not always correct. It can be very stereotyped. It's very important to integrate with all different academics who have a different background, as well as I have to be able to have a more massive variety of data. I'm an individual researcher. It's very limited to have it. So I have to work with the industry network too. It's also quite important as an academic network with governors from national, state, city governors, as well as mobile service providers, credit card company, as well as tech companies too, like the Google or Yahoo. Without their help, it's extremely difficult to make the successful research, impactful research in the smart tourism field. At the end, as I said, big data is a very fundamental, important part to have a new angle, new insights in terms of smart tourism, and the integration of the diverse data will give us potentially more insight, collaborations with the innovative partners, including academic, industry is quite critical and essential as well. Okay, thank you very much. This is all my presentation today.
Thank you, Professor Park, because I know you will have to leave us earlier. Just a quick question.
Sure, yeah.
How happy are you or unhappy with the knowledge uptake? Obviously, you develop new knowledge, you are using the data, so there is no gap in the existence of the data. But where is the gap? I mean, how happy are you with the knowledge implementation?
Yes, I mean, it's a very critical question. Actually, yes, even I keep saying data, but understanding the relevant or past literature is a fundamental. So I have read lots of literature in travel mobility or data-related paper. And then those travel mobility, before we have this big data, they only have using such a formatted data or the small data. Somehow, these results not always generalizable. When I find out new results, new insights that previous literature couldn't discover, when I find it, I can say, wow, this is the main reason I keep doing the research. But sometimes in my own angle, inside, I cannot find a new results, new finding from there. The reason why I always try to find collaborators who give me different such an eye or different size to look at, even though there's some pattern, same object, different background, different their educations, different their culture, their understanding, somehow quite distinctive or different. This always giving me such a new motivations, encouragement to keep doing my own research.
Thank you. I hope that the time permits you to stay a bit longer so we can elaborate on that a little bit later. So Professor Dolichar.
I'm very sorry, Emil, that I actually had another university commitment. So let me go there first. And if the work is still valid and still going, I promise that I will rejoin and then I can join in more conversation with you guys.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to hopefully you'll be able to join us back.
Okay. Thank you very much again. Yeah.
Thank you for now.
Thank you.
Sarah, sustainable tourism is one of the key areas of your research. As you said in our emails, when we were emailing to each other, you said you don't want to talk about tourism marketing anymore. But obviously, you know, sustainable tourism is a big issue. Everybody wants to make it more sustainable, but obviously we're not that successful, right? I remember one interesting sentence which said, we're not walking the talk of sustainable tourism. So can you please share with us some of your work that you're doing, and of course your thoughts on where the knowledge is valid, helpful, and what we still need to learn to make tourism more sustainable?
Absolutely. Thank you, Emil. Let me just figure out this screen share here. Can you see my slides?
We can.
And you can see them in presentation mode? Fantastic. Exactly. All right, let's go. So yes, I was asked to talk about marketing and sustainable tourism, and he gave me 10 minutes. I said, no, I'm not doing this. I mean, the reality is we've done enough marketing research, right? So I don't think with marketing, it's such a big discrepancy. We know a lot about marketing. Maybe there are still a few open questions, but generally the contradiction of what we know and what we don't know maybe is a bit smaller. So I thought it was maybe more exciting to talk about the environmental sustainability space, because here we have quite a bit of knowledge, but a lot of gaps in knowledge, and certainly a lot of gaps in uptake in terms of making the industry really sustainable. So let's have a look. Oh, I went too far. So in terms of knowledge, I think there's two things we can say with certainty we know. One is we know there's a problem, right? We know that tourism is not environmentally sustainable. And I'll give you just a few facts. We know we need tourism, 10% of GDP, 1 in every 10 jobs. And that's why we're not giving up, right? We're addicted. Economies are addicted to tourism. But here's our performance in terms of sustainability. We are the 5th most polluting industry on the planet. We generate 8% of global CO2 emissions. We contribute up to 12.5% to global warming. We generate 35 million tons of solid waste every year. And for every day we accommodate a guest in a hotel, they use 300 liters of water. Now, that doesn't mean that they're obsessively showering, but by the time you add landscaping, pools, bed linen, all of these things, that's the amount. So absolutely gigantic impact on the environment. And the other thing we know is we know that we don't have many, but we have a few random solutions to attack this. Now, the one thing I think Emil mentioned, and I will actually not talk about today, is that there are opportunities for governments to take action, right? And there's opportunities for businesses to take action. But that doesn't happen very often. Why does it not happen? Because economies rely on the income from tourism, right? So when we say I actually had a conversation with a politician here in Australia, I said, you should just make it law that hotels do not clean the room every day. And the reality is they can't, as much as they want to make it law, they can't, because the tourism industry would be up in arms, yeah? Or they might be worried that they will reduce tourism demand, which ultimately impacts on the GDP impact. And the same is true for industry. Like, you think about industry, we know that tourism is defined by small and medium enterprises, right? So we go to a little hotel that's barely surviving, that's barely repaying the mortgage, and we sit down and we preach to them about sustainability. Well, obviously, this is not going to work particularly well. So I think that's the reasons why we all know there's a problem, but we're just finding it so very difficult to change this situation. But there are a few solutions, and I'm going to talk you through a few of my favorites, and some of them are actually collaborative work, which is the topic of our panel today, and they're international collaborative work, mostly with my wonderful colleagues in Slovenia. And for those of you who don't know, I am a native Slovenian, proudly so. So it makes me extra happy to be able to work with my colleagues in Ljubljana and in Portorož. So here's a little study we did in Bohinj Eco Hotel. And it was about room cleaning. Now, what we don't talk about when we talk about hotel room cleaning is that every time we clean a room, on average, this is a 4-star hotel, we use 35 liters of water, we use 1.5 kilowatt hours of electricity, and we use 100 milliliters of chemicals. And now imagine you stay for a week and the hotel cleans your room every day. Is that really necessary? Well, in most instances, it's not necessary, right? So all these resources we're using are wasted for no good reason. In fact, interestingly, during COVID, hotel guests were very unhappy about cleaners entering the room. Yeah, so it was the perfect excuse to stop this routine, environmentally unfriendly and costly, unnecessary daily room clean. So what we asked ourselves is, could we do something to bribe people? But we didn't bribe them to waive their room clean. Now you're going to say, and that's what the journal said, that's nothing new. A lot of hotels do that. And that's true. A lot of hotels do that, but we don't know how successful they are. So we don't know the uptake of those initiatives. And we don't know the theoretical functioning underlying those mechanisms. So that's what we aimed to achieve with this little study. And what we did is we actually talked to people and realized that there's a lot of cynicism among tourists. They think to themselves, well, we're being asked to reuse the towels, but really it's not about the environment, is it? It's just the hotel wanting to save money. Yeah. And so we latched on to that emotion and we offered them to share the savings from the room clean. Now, the baseline was about 3%. So about 3% of hotel guests without an incentive are going to opt out of room cleaning. We said, we're going to share. We're going to go half-half. Half of the savings the hotel is going to pocket. The other half of the savings we're going to give you back in the shape of a drinks voucher. And this little intervention reduced room cleaning by 42%, massively reducing the cost for the hotel. So a win-win. Interestingly, we then added, oh, sorry, I forgot to say, no reduction in happiness. Guest satisfaction just as high. In fact, we are observing a very flourishing black market for drinks vouchers, right? So I would argue they were quite happy with that. They were enjoying it even more with the drinks vouchers. But interestingly, adding a pro-environmental appeal did absolutely nothing, right? So that cognitive belief-based intervention did absolutely nothing. So that's just one example of how by sharing and not preaching, and without a compromise, the hotel wins, the environment wins, the guest wins, we were able to make a little bit of a positive difference. Even simpler intervention, again in Ljubljana, that was a collaboration with Ljubica Knežević from the University of Ljubljana. We changed the default. We simply said, we're going to change this around. Instead of asking you to tell us when you don't want your room cleaned, we're going to ask you to tell us when you do want your room cleaned. And we're not going to charge you. It's no surcharge, no money involved, no vouchers, no nothing. We're just changing the default. You either tell us you want it cleaned or you don't want it cleaned. We're now asking you to tell us when you do want it cleaned. And that tiny little change, 63% reduction in room cleaning, and the guests were just as happy as they were before. What do we have next? Shower time. Oh, that's not my research. I don't want to wrongly claim this as my genius research, but it is genius. So what they did is they just basically had an instant feedback when guests were showering. And there was no environmental messaging. You could just see the liters that were flowing through. And that very simple instantaneous feedback reduced energy cost with hot water, associated with hot water, by 11%, not to the detriment of guest satisfaction. All right, and then we come to Emil and my work. This is one of my all-time favorite studies. It was really good fun. We had a very simple idea. Knowing our kids, we said kids do everything for stamps and stickers. So we generated a little, oh no, I'm still sorry. I'm talking about someone else's study. This is another genius study that I didn't do, which is very sad, because actually it is the best study on plate waste. These are colleagues from Scandinavia, and they did something simple. They reduced the plate size by 3 centimeters at the breakfast buffet. And that very simple intervention reduced plate waste, that's the uneaten leftovers, by 20%, and people were just as happy. The same group also used the table sign, where they told people go back as often as you want instead of overfilling your plate. And again, 21% reduction, cost reduction, and very happy campers. And now I'm going to ramp up my enthusiasm again about our stamp collection study. So this we did in Porto Roxo, which there's a hotel with lots of families, and they have a dinner buffet. And a lot of the food that's taken from the buffet is not eaten. So we listened to our kids, observed kids, new stamps and stickers work, and we produced this little idea here. And you see, it's very not high tech. So Sangwon Park would be very unimpressed with us. It's just a piece of paper. And every day when the whole family ate up everything that was on the plate, they got a stamp. And at the end of the stay, if they had all stamps, they were rewarded with a little prize. reduction of 38% in uneaten food left behind. And you should see those kids. They were just loving it, right? Because it was a game. And instead of detracting from their vacation enjoyment, it in fact added their vacation enjoyment. All right, just a simple one to finish off. This is not targeting consumers, this is targeting cooks. They simply changed the bins from big transparent bins, not my study again, not taking credit. They took out the big intransparent bins, replaced them with small transparent bins, 73% reduction in food preparation waste in the kitchen. All right, we need to develop some more. That's my gap now, because Emil asked me to talk, what do we know and what's the gap? But the gap is we need more tangible solutions, and we need tangible solutions that are not implying a compromise, because industry needs to adapt them, right? So we need industry to save money, otherwise they're not going to do it. We need tourists to not sacrifice enjoyment, otherwise they're not going to do it. Yeah, we need to invent them, test them, and we need to get industry on board. And a very important way to do this is to run experiments instead of surveys. So if I have any students listening today, listen, now you need to listen to me. Yeah. So you can do surveys, but surveys have a fundamental problem. You compare to experiments. The surveys, you don't know in which direction cause and effect goes, because you're asking at the same time. You're asking multiple things at the same time. Yeah. Did you like the food? Did you eat up? We're asking them at the same time. First of all, they can't remember anyway. But secondly, because we ask them at the same time, we don't know, is this thing affecting this thing, or is this thing affecting this thing? So we never know cause and effect. In the experiment we do, because we have that middle thing, that's what we are changing. We are introducing a stamp collection booklet. So we know when we measure before the introduction of the stamp collection booklet, we get a certain number. Then we do the stamp collection booklet, we get another number. We know that that's the cause, because that's the only thing that changed. So that's the power of the experiment. We are in control of adding, removing, or adding this thing. And we definitely need more experimental studies. And to wrap up, for sustainability in specific, I hope I convinced you that if we are creative, we can actually generate real win-win-win situations. We can do that by reducing the environmental damage caused by the operations of a business or a destination, by reducing their operating cost. And that's how we get them hooked, right? Because you go to a hotel, you say, I'm going to save you cost. And they go, yes, we'll do anything. That's perfect. Let's save cost. Yeah, so they save cost. So it's two wins. For the destination, we could really position it as a green, well, also for the business, but also as a whole destination. We could genuinely position ourselves. And Slovenia is doing that extraordinarily well. Like, of all destinations, Slovenia has just been super consistent with that positioning, and also puts the money where the mouth is. And we are not sacrificing vacation enjoyment, so the risk of losing our tourists is relatively low. All right, sorry, Emil, I went 2 minutes over. That's not usually like me, but that's it. I'm finished, and I'm happy to take questions now or later, whatever works better for you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's okay, because we had 2 cancellations last minute, so there's some time. Before giving the floor to Professor Einarsson, because obviously I know a lot about your work, Sarah. So you mentioned the knowledge gap in terms of making tourism to be more successful in uptaking the knowledge, right? So 2 short questions. Do you think the reasons for not uptaking are different around the world? Because we're talking international collaboration and tourism is a global activity. And the second question, what do you think we don't know? I mean, why this knowledge, those studies, those results that you mentioned, the smaller plates, the stamplets, and so on and so forth, why industry is not uptaking this? Because it's not costly, obviously, you mentioned. It's actually reducing costs.
So the first question is, I actually don't think there's big differences. I think there's differences across the world in how consumers behave. So as you know, Emil and I did a study, so Emil knows, but the audience doesn't know, where we compared behavior in China and Slovenia. And we found quite distinct differences. We found that the Slovenians are much more likely to transfer pro-environmental habits into the vacation space, whereas in the Chinese culture, there's a very strict obedience to what's the right thing to do in the home context. But then there's almost a liberation and unshackling when they go into the vacation space. And so they do not actually transfer those habits particularly well. So I think there's always differences in cultures. But when you ask me about uptake by industry, I think that's pretty much the same everywhere. Because why? It's ruled by money. right? So all these businesses want to survive and they want to make a profit. And so I think the uptake, I mean, there are idealists. I remember speaking at some industry conferences, and you could tell that the industry is passionate about sustainability. But the real way to get them involved is to promise them cost savings. And so, and I'm not saying promising as in manipulating, right? But as we develop interventions, we just need to be mindful of that. Yeah, we need to understand that if we're going to go to a business and say, I have this brilliant idea, but it's going to cost you $10,000, well, the excitement's probably going to be limited. So I think we can get them to adopt these things. What we're not very good at is kind of broad communication of these things. Yeah, they don't read journal articles. Yeah, we can't reach. They're not listening to our webinars. So we really need to be smarter. Well, we need to develop and test these interventions. And then we need to be really smart in developing step-by-step foolproof guides that have all the materials available, that are disseminated through international associations, so that we can incentivize the uptake, make it really easy for a business to say, oh yeah, why not? I'm going to try it. It's actually not so hard. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Keep up the enthusiasm, because we'll get back to that later on.
All right.
Thank you for now. So Professor Einarsson, I believe that formal tourism education is a prevailing tool for distributing knowledge to new and existing generations of tourism scholars, and obviously also to industry members. How would you describe the education in tourism, and what do you think are the key areas for improvement?
First of all, the knowledge base, is expanding. And this has resulted in numerous specialist curricula, often linked to the background interest of the teacher or the research interest, also to the institution specialism and to its location. For example, spa tourism is quite evident in certain Central and Eastern European countries. The biggest problem that educators have had. May I share my screen, please?
By all means. Yeah, it's coming up.
In the last couple of years is the delivery method, because there've been 2 years of dramatic change. It's a huge impact on international visitor, employee and student flows. There have been mergers, takeovers, closures, which have had an impact on employees and management and consumers. So in terms of vocational education, face-to-face has moved to virtual and hybrid. And in many cases, it is apparent that virtual and hybrid education are here to stay, particularly for large lectures. There are drawbacks here. The communication system, lack of interpersonal contact, lack of tangibility, and students have complained that this has had an impact on their learning and on their morale. It's been a massive workload for the teachers, not only in the provision of online materials, but also opportunities for interaction and maintenance of interest through the activities. There are some benefits because people don't have to travel, so we can have a global audience. Students can stay in their own countries, whereas when they couldn't afford to travel, they can now perhaps join the courses that they really wanted to. And a query the dress code, because people are attending lectures in their pajamas. Lecturers are giving lectures in shorts. You don't know what I've got on in my lower half. I could be totally naked and you wouldn't know, because as long as the top half looks okay, this is fine. People are switching their cameras off. I'm not getting at Miha, but if students are in my class, they have to have their cameras on. They're not allowed to switch their cameras off because you don't have to do it. This is a problem. If the camera is off, where are they? What are they doing? Are they really there at all? I've spoken to people, not in lectures, but when I've done seminars, and they've not been behind the camera because I don't get a response. So how do we deal with this? The personal and interpersonal development needs have therefore changed. If you look at the research, and I've done a fair amount of research into the needs of managers in the industry, and they claim that we should prepare students in terms of their communication skills, their problem solving, the use of initiative, the negotiating skills, their decision making, their time management, etc., etc. But the new normal has now put to the forefront survival skills, dealing with conflict, and even better time management, etc. So I think this is an area that's ripe for research. And perhaps we need to consider bringing some of these things into our teaching and learning. I've been researching for some time the curriculum and how we can make real and virtual links with industry. Obviously, work placements are a very strong way in which we can make a link, but particularly international work placements have been a problem due to the pandemic. So students are being encouraged to do local casual work when the businesses are open. They're all open again now here, and they're desperately short of labour because most of the Central and Eastern Europeans, where they could, went back home. So we have a huge labour shortage. Company-derived management reports, where the company asks the students to write a report, this is still feasible. Business games, particularly virtual business games, still very valuable. Individual research or consultancy projects, these are still ongoing. Keeping up with current issues in international and global management. Obviously, the media is a way of doing this, research papers, books, reports, etc. One of my favourite topics is group management consultancy or live group projects. I introduced these in the 70s in Manchester Met, and I've introduced them in various other countries since. And now there are lots of people doing these, where a group of students works for industry. This is more difficult at the moment because of the communication issues, the data collection issues, and so on. Business presentation and communication skills, obviously always important. I taught cultural dimensions for many years and was able to use my experience. You can also, if you've got an international group, use the experience of the audience. And I learned a lot about the Far East from my students. I didn't actually go to the Far East until about 20 years ago. And so I knew nothing about the culture, and I used to use my students. Virtual and live case studies, I've focused very much on case studies now for my teaching, as you'll find out shortly. Field studies, where groups of students go to a location and study the location, difficult at the moment, but we have additionally webinars like this one. And this year I've been fortunate to go to several global conferences, which were free. One had over 5,000 attendees, and we were able to network, we were able to chat to people at a distance. And I would encourage your students to attend these conferences. Sometimes you've got to get out of bed early, sometimes you've got to stay up late, but they are very valuable learning experiences. So, as I've said, I focus now on case studies, scenarios, and practical exercises to promote experiential learning. And I taught a postgraduate virtual distance learning module in Taiwan in 2020. I think case studies are valuable because they enable students to consider, debate, and offer solutions to questions. They help to analyse, synthesize, and evaluate problems. They offer feasible, practical, and ideally cost-effective solutions. And they develop critical thinking, practical experience for career development, integrate subjects, and improve interpersonal skills and self-confidence. This ethics course began with an introduction to hospitality and tourism ethics. Then I introduced the students to case studies, the requirements, the criteria, team roles, and teamwork. And then I took a different approach to teaching tourism and hospitality, because I looked at everything from the perspective of ethics. So I looked at ethical leadership and management practices, ethical business management and operations, ethical management of employees and consumers. The individual coursework comprised their writing 2 case studies. So I did one-to-one tutorials, first of all, with each student to discuss the topics and how they were going to write these case studies. Then we looked at economic responsibility, social responsibility, environmental responsibility, which obviously includes sustainability, but it was such a huge topic that we looked at that in a separate session. Then they had to present their coursework. This produced a few challenges, but we managed to do it successfully. And their presentations were excellent. Their PowerPoint was actually a lot better than mine. And then we did an exercise where they had to choose an unethical practice, and they researched it just over 24 hours. And then we had a webinar to debate their findings. They could use a few slides if they wanted to. So this was really valuable because we had some extremely interesting learning experiences. If you pass the learning over to the students, you learn a lot more from them than they will ever learn from you. That is my opinion, because they have some really brilliant original ideas. And then we did evaluation and tutorials for coursework 2, which was done subsequent to the unit. I did all this teaching within 2.5 weeks. It was a block unit. So our book is now published. The cases focus on problems and key ethical issues related to hospitality and tourism management. And I didn't prompt them with their topics. I was a bit concerned because of the cultural differences, that when we talked about things like LGBT, they would be worried, but actually they were not at all. So they were set in or originated from Asia, including China, Indonesia, Japan, Myanmar, Nepal, Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand, and Vietnam, Eastern Europe, and West Africa. And one student wrote about space tourism, which was very innovative. The contributors represented 7 countries, and they used their research, their specialist local knowledge, and their real-life experiences. They highlighted unethical practices from perspectives of managers, employees, guests, and/or locals, sometimes in a legal context, because obviously the laws are quite different in this set of countries. The curriculum areas or departments, I didn't specify these, but we got a good spread: HR, F&B, rooms division, sustainable tourism, cave tourism, cultural tourism, sports tourism, and $0 tourism, which I didn't know anything about until I saw this case: mountaineering, tour guiding, and travel agency. The topics were workplace bullying, sexual harassment, racial, cultural, LGBT discrimination, financial exploitation, dishonesty, online purchases and internet scams, health, safety, security and risk management, legal issues, conservation, environmental protection, responsible tourism, sustainability and tourism planning. So I ended up with this book, which they've all got a copy of, and we published it within about 3 months. I had to edit all the cases, particularly English, but I told them not to worry because we had 2 further editors. One of Matthew is from Singapore and Mark was the local tutor. So we were able to liaise to edit the book. So now all the students, some of which are going on to do a PhD, have got 2 publications. That's it.
Thank you, Liz. I think that the key lesson is basically what you said, so that educators need to learn from students and industry. So we'll get back to that a little bit later in the last section. Thank you for now. Tourism depends heavily on natural and cultural resources. We obviously agree with that. And I would like to ask Professor Vujicic to cover this area by pointing out his experiences and thoughts on knowledge and knowledge gaps in the field of tourist valorization of nature and cultural assets of tourist places. So Miroslav, please.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, Emil. Do you see my presentation?
We do, yes.
You do, okay, thank you. So hello once again. So being the last, it's not always the easiest. And after all these great presentations. So I will try to give a brief presentation of my research I'm doing and also to connect it to networks it brought me and collaborations and cooperations. So if we talk about the tourism valorization, or I will call it like evaluation models, developing evaluation models, and I later connect that to the impact assessment models. This is something I'm dealing right now. So as Sarah said, she was in marketing, so I started with those tourism valorization models at first. And well, the research gap in the evaluation models is still present because we don't have the comprehensive model. It's never going to be comprehensive model and the final model. It's always going to be tested in space and time, and you're going to mix approaches, mix innovative tools. So it's always expanding. And so we have those quantitative approaches, we have those qualitative approaches, researchers in that domain or the other domain. Well, it all has its limitations and benefits. So if you, for example, turn to qualitative approach, sometimes it's biased by the evaluator's opinions, or if you say the quants are the best, the quantitative approach, it might just reflect the tip of the iceberg in the evaluation model. So nowadays, you will find in the papers mostly use mixed methodology approaches, like a overall complex model. You need to look at the issue at different approaches and try to capture the most of it. So as I started, it was like 10 years ago, I think, to venture into the field of tourism valorization models. And we were introduced with some official models from World Tourism Organization or from academic models we used for the cultural heritage, for example, valorization Hilary Ducros model, introduced by our professors at the faculty. And as I'm being at a department of geography, tourism, and hotel management, I connected to the geography, to the natural assets of the tourism. So my first developed model, it's 2013, it was preliminary geosite assessment model. So we defined certain indicators and try to measure the attractiveness of a geosite. Geosite is mostly connected to abiotic part of the nature, non-living part of the nature, gorges, caves, etc., etc. Then we tested that through some comparative analysis. These are several papers. Then we developed one multi-criteria decision analysis connecting archaeology, 2 geography. Then we tested that model previously mentioned using 3 different methods. This is mixed methodology approach. We tested through some mathematical models, multi-criteria decision models, and also used some statistical methods. And when I ventured further into the evaluation processes, and as I said, I'm also involved in the project application development. Then I started to get interest not just to plan the tourism, but to measure the effect that tourism has. And then I came to the impact assessment models. And what projects and consultancy did for me is to connect it to the industry. And for example, I started to work for European Capital of Culture, Novi Sad 2022, as a chief evaluator, trying to measure the impact this project will bring to the city and the surrounding. And when you measure the impact, it's always a complex thing. You need to measure not just the impact, but the spillover effect it has on the surrounding. And it's not a one-man show. You need help. So this is why I connected to different colleagues. I reached out at my university, not just at my faculty, but the whole university, and connected with colleagues from the economy, psychology, sociology, mathematics and computer science, spatial analysis, and formed a team. And we tried to develop a model that will capture that impact that ECOC brings to the city and the surrounding. And this is like a brief presentation of our methodology developed. So it was first the 7 dimensions, which was developed based on the academic and gray literature from previous reports from the previous ECOCs. And we brought it down to 3 main dimensions: culture, community, and economy. Economy being the tourism and creative industry sector. And it goes down in different sub-indicators and sub-layers. And this is, for example, the community. So social cohesion, social capital network, space identity, perception, and then social inclusion, exclusion, sense of belonging. So this is not just the tourism domain anymore. It's a more complex thing. I was mainly dealing the research in the tourism domain and managing the research team, but it needed a lot of colleagues to help us with measuring the impact. And it brought me a lot of collaborators outside my research area. And it's an interesting thing, and it's an ongoing process. You reinvent yourself. You venture into different fields. It's not just the tourism field, but as we know, tourism is really complex. So you had those Sangwon, so geography, physics, mathematics, computer science. So you connect with a lot of colleagues trying to research the impact, for example, tourism has on the surrounding. Also, we had one project, for example, now we are developing the doctoral networks, and we are collaborating with computer scientists and physics also in the climate change. So we're going to measure how the tourism affects the climate change and how the climate change is going to affect the tourism. So back to our external evaluation methodology. So then, as we written the reports from year to year, as it's a longitudinal process, we started to evaluate the impact before the title year from 2016, and we're going to measure it from 2024. We read our long reports. It's for one report from one research, for example, for a community, it's like 100 research report. And we wanted to make it more appealing and easily understandable to the wider public, to the policymakers. So we wanted to make it as one number, to quantify it. So we developed a methodology using fuzzy measures and inner and outer aggregation. This is the math connection with my colleague from the mathematics. And so we have 1 and 2nd level of aggregation, inner and outer, based on the expert's opinion. And on the other hand, we had the test, as Sarah was talking about, the primary data collected on the field. When we overlap that, we get one number, which represents the impact European Capital of Culture project is having on the city and the wider surrounding. And this was a work from like 4 years now. We are investigating, and we're going to invest a lot of effort into making this model better. And so we're going to we're going to introduce it. We developed a paper and going to introduce it to the academic environment. It was really, really well accepted by the, let's say, industry or panel before the European Commission we had in Timisoara 1 year ago, as most of the European capital of culture didn't have this methodology, not one index that's going to measure. Why it's important also, we can make a comparison with other European capital of culture. So a comparative added value is additional to this. So these are several past and ongoing international projects. For example, we are going to start also interesting project on Green Deal focus area, developing Green Deal competence framework, and try to develop innovative tools to impact the behavior of wider public, of students, school children, policymakers within the Green Deal focus areas. So what international projects brought to me is really, really good connections. And I went outside my, let's say, comfort zone, and ventured into different research areas. And it's brought me really, really good connection, not just to the research domain, but also to the industry. And before you start to network with the world, you need to network within your backyard. These are just several colleagues I collaborated within my house, my department, and I would suggest you do the same. It's much easier. It's not one-man show. It's always a joint effort. Sarah was telling about the co-creating, so we co-create to joint effort, and it's always good to connect with your colleagues. It's more fun that way, and it's going to be more easy for you. And then you can venture into the world, go to the conferences, publish your papers, brand yourself on social media, tell your stories, tell your success stories, and connect with the colleagues. And the last slide, it's about my International Tourism Studies Association, I call it It's a Family. It brought me a lot of good connection. For example, James Kennell is part also of this great network. And well, you need to find your networks, connect, reach out, and it's going to be success definitely. So thank you. That's from me.
Thank you, Miroslav. Thank you all for these presentations, more or less successful presentation of what we know and what we do not know about the specific areas. But now let's move on to a more dynamic conversation. So it's going to be it's not going to be a one-man show. Sarah, you've mentioned some of your international collaborations at the beginning. Can you please share with us what are the typical barriers and challenges you face when you want to reach out to, for example, me, Slovenia, and collaborate with? I know your recent projects with China and all others. So what are the typical barriers and challenges you face?
Do you know what? I think the trick is to not give up, right? The trick is that out of 10, one is going to work. If you're lucky, in fact, right? So I have a principle, and my principle is I will collaborate with everyone once. But that sounds very generous, but it's actually not, right? Because you learn pretty quickly when you can really collaborate productively with someone and when you can't. And it's not always that you are doing something wrong or they are doing something wrong. It's about matching up. It's matching up how you like to work, how, it's just match, and also match of competence, like we just heard before. I have a long-term collaborator who is a statistics expert. Well, that's fantastic. I don't want to do anything without her because I'm good, but I'm not a professional statistician, right? So it's about complementarity, and it's about personal, just getting along and enjoying each other's company and working together. And so you've got to try, you always try new collaborations, but they don't work, right? Some people just don't respond when you approach them. Others you try and nothing ever comes out of it, but you just have to keep trying and just accept that, 1 out of 10 might be successful. 1 out of 50 might last for 10 years. That's just how it is.
So a lot of work in vain What drives you? What do you want to
Well,
collaborate?
but it's always, I mean, if I would say that, I would never start a working day, right? Because half my experiments fail, half my papers don't get published, half my grants don't get funded, right? So if I would be in it for success, I couldn't step into my office in the morning. That's just reality. So what drives me are problems. And I've had a really interesting experience just recently, because I had a meeting with colleagues, and we were kind of talking about writing a paper, and it was just so unsatisfying. And I just couldn't understand why it was so unsatisfying. And so the whole holiday, I was kind of pondering why it was so unsatisfying. And the reason was that it was about engineering a paper. And that's not what I'm in the business for. Okay, so what drives me every day and what gets me through all the failures or in vain efforts, as you call them, is that I like to solve problems, right? Like there's stuff I want to fix. There's problems I'm interested in. There's engine rooms I want to look into, right? And that's what drives me. And everything else is just fluff. It doesn't matter. You reject my paper, no problem. You know, I'll write another one. It's just not, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter. I think what drives me is there's important things that I'm curious about, that I want to solve. And that's what my focus is on.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Liz, I happen to know about your long-term collaboration within the European academics area, especially Eastern European, as you mentioned. And I also know you're heavily involved with Eurocre and the already mentioned FTŠ Swiss-based association. Can you tell me more about the two organizations or associations and your key challenges working with being a UK-based researcher with the Eastern European researchers and industry? How was this evolving, and what were the key issues that you faced? Can you put the microphone on, please? It's still off, Liz. The mic is not on.
Now?
Now it's working, thank you.
Thank you. I've been in international CRE for over 30 years, and I was a founding member of Eurocre in the 1990s. Eurocre used to have 2 conferences per annum, and international CRE had 1 conference. And the first time I went, my boss sent me and he said, you have to target 2 people and I want you to invite them to Manchester. So this was my first dipping my toe in the water. And I didn't know the people. They were quite eminent researchers. So I had to go over to America. I had been there before, and find these people. And I succeeded. And I think what Sarah said is important. You mustn't give up. This is the most important thing. If you want to do something, you do it. I see there are no challenges. You've just got to seek and take opportunities. I don't have obstacles in front of me. If I want to do something, I'm pretty determined I will do it. Okay, I don't always win, but at least I've tried. And the other thing you've got to do is accept when you're not getting anywhere and move on. And I think Sarah implied that too. La Fondation I started working with in the early 2000s. I went to make a presentation in London because they were asking for additional lecturers to go to Central and Eastern Europe. And there were various other universities in the UK there. And I won the, I think it was a pitch, it was called. So the person that I was working with retired, and I put myself forward to take over from him. It took me about 2 years to get his position. Not that there was much competition, but it took the board a long time to decide. And then they asked me to find new partners. So people like Miha were very helpful. I met Miha through somebody I'd met at a conference, and I used snowballing and networking. And I built up from 6 to 19 countries and the 28 institutions we've got now. I've used my existing links to get people to write case studies for my annual books. And I now have case studies from Africa, Asia, Australasia, Europe, North America. I don't have any from South America. I've got 1 or 2 written about South America, but no contributors from there. I also keep in contact with the PhD graduates that I know I can work with, and we still publish papers. And Matthew, who edits my books, was one of my MSc and PhD graduates. I think the most important thing is to gain academic respect and also trust from your peers and also from the hierarchy. And my biggest move was to get a PhD, because I didn't do it when I was in my 20s, but I was in my early 30s. And that was one of the first PhDs in the department. So I then managed to pick and choose as opposed to being told what to do. This was very important. And I was publishing. And I think you need to develop independence and leadership, but also contribute to teamwork. And more importantly, offer to mentor people in the workplace. I did quite a lot of mentorship. You also need to gain respect and trust of industry by cooperating on practical projects. I did this through the group consultancy, keeping up links with alumni. I had a newsletter that I published for 15 years. So I kept in touch with the alumni, visiting students and work experience and updating. And I think you've got to volunteer for key roles. You don't sit and wait to be asked, but you put yourself forward, particularly if you're interested in doing things. I was the Eurocre Board Director of Research for 5 years. So that put me in a fairly strong position to network. In terms of successes, I did a presentation for our department for EU funding in the early 1990s. And that started off my links in Central and Eastern Europe. We got £500,000 then, and we had subsequent funding. I also managed to fund myself by doing consultancies for industry through the university. So the money went into the university. So when I wanted to travel, I didn't have to ask if I could be funded, because there was funding there. Majority of people had to ask for funding, whereas I had a pot, which was very valuable. And in terms of future avenues, I think we've got to look at attending these virtual events, targeting people, networking, chatting, and participating in social sessions. Quite honestly, at conferences, the people who are really successful very often only attend a few presentations, but they make sure they do their networking and they target the people they want to work with. Okay.
Thank you, Liz. Before asking of your concluding remarks, and of course I'll have to apologize for taking 10 minutes of 10 minutes more of your time, I would like to ask Miroslav, because I'm sure that Sarah and Liz do not know for Turismiada, which used to be initially it was meant as a social happy gathering of students across the Europe. But then this grew into an event, a networking event for knowledge development and knowledge sharing. Can you tell us a little bit about the Turismiada and how this evolved?
Well, it evolved like a regional concept. It's not connected to one country, but to the region, and connected to connecting the region in one, let's say, product, successful product. But behind that, it's always the energy of individuals. It's always the energy of the individuals which brought Turismiada to present form. And it's connected to our dear colleague Michal Esiak, who invested a lot of energy in making this an event successful. And why it's a good thing is that students move away from their faculties, and all professors from those faculties go at one place, and we mix with each other. It's a classic student conference, let's say. It's not intended for us, but the students, as they don't have too much events like that during their studies. They will have conferences when they start their research, but not during their studies. So that's why it's really beneficial to them. And might I add up to something you asked Sarah, where's the energy and everything? This is something really important message she said to the let's say early stage researchers. Hopefully they are listening this presentation. It's if you don't have the energy and the motivation, you're in the wrong business. Don't start. You will fall. It's always important to get up. You get your paper rejected, you don't get grants funded, but you can always resubmit, improve. And what is also important is that faculty is never over for us. You always need to learn something new. You always need to reinvent yourself. As for example, I started learning R for structural equation modeling. Now we're dealing with neuromarketing with the eye tracker. We bought it for successful communication. And you always need to learn something new. So the faculty, the education is never over for us. We might be the professors, but we also learn. And this is something that gets me going, like Sarah, for so many issues, so many problems, interesting problems that need some innovative, new collaborative way of thinking. So this is really beneficial to us. And be always with the young people, surrounded with young, smart minds. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Miroslav. Before the concluding remarks, we got one question, and it's meant for Liz, and it says, what seems to be missing while students join the industry were the life skills. So due to the COVID-19, survival skills have taken over. So do we have to redefine life skills as well now? That's the question.
Possibly we do, because I think particularly survival skills are still very much to the fore. So I think there needs to be more research in this area, as I said earlier. I think they do need redefining, yes.
All right. Thank you, Liz. Sarah, concluding remarks. Coming from Australia, but having a lot of experiences also with Europe, what do you think, if there is a need, what needs to be done to increase, if there is a need to increase an international academic research collaboration to improve tourism? What would you say? What needs to be done, if there is anything that needs to be done?
Yeah, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Never thought about this. I think, as I said before, I think collaborations are organic things. And I think every university I know wants to engineer collaborations. And for me, it's never worked. Like, unless I've just connected with someone and I enjoyed working with them. So absolutely, there's a lot of potential. In fact, we're talking about grant funding bodies. There's grant funding bodies that encourage proactively intercontinental collaborations, right? So absolutely, we should take the opportunity to do that. But I think we can't do it top down. We can't say, ooh, we're going to take this person from here and this person from here, and then this is all going to work beautifully. I think we need to create opportunities where people meet each other. Like today, in fact, I met some lovely colleagues I haven't heard speak before today. And you know, we connect and then we try something, and maybe it works or maybe it doesn't. But certainly there's enough challenges and problems we could tackle, and we can tackle them better together.
All right, thank you. So we need to be hungry for problem solving and collaborating with that. Thank you,
Always
Sarah.
hungry.
Thank you. Liz, what personal advice to the industry and young academics on building networks on knowledge development and sharing would you give at the end of this webinar?
I think take any travel, learning, job and promotion opportunities, learn about other cultures, keep in touch with industry practices and updating, and take part in collaborative projects if you can, so learn from other people. But I think the most important person in the networking is yourself. If you don't push yourself, people aren't going to approach you. It's highly unlikely. It might be your supervisors for your PhD will approach you, but beyond that, you've got to really push yourself. You need to take opportunities to make presentations, to get yourself seen virtually, because this is important. Join LinkedIn, put a profile on ResearchGate, go directly to experts, begin with free events and publish, or try to publish, but don't aim too high initially, because this can be a problem. People say, oh, you need to go for a top ranked journal. If you're a new researcher, that's very difficult, particularly if you've not got the support of an academic who's published in a top ranked journal. So you need to start slowly and build your way up rather than try to go for the top. Travel and time costs used to be a barrier, but they've been addressed by COVID because, as I said before, I've been to several virtual conferences. I've presented at virtual and hybrid conferences this year. 1 week in July, I was at Malaysia in the morning and in the USA in the afternoon and evening. Okay, you've got to put the time in, and you might argue that I'm partly retired, so I've got the time to do it. But as I said earlier, it is yourself. You've got to push and try to make time. And this was another new skill that I put forward. You've really got to improve your time management. How much time do you spend, for example, texting on your phone every day? You'd be amazed if you actually record what you do over 2 or 3 days. You'd be amazed how much time you waste. Okay, we need to relax, but we get sidetracked. So you're working on something, an email comes through, a text comes through, so you stop and answer. The other thing that I did when I was doing my PhD was, if I stopped and I knew I had to stop for more than a couple of minutes, I used to write down, you are doing this, you need to do this, because you forget where you're up to. So if you leave something for half an hour, you're retracing your steps, trying to find where it was you were at. So just make a note of what you were doing, what you were thinking, and what you were going to do when you come back. But I think time management is absolutely of the essence.
Thank you, Liz. That's a great advice. I can still remember, and Sarah probably too, managing me with the PhD process. I mean, Miroslav,
Yes.
if asking for an advice to the industry on how to improve the uptake of the existing knowledge in tourism, what would you say?
Sorry, could you repeat?
What would you advise to the industry on how to improve the uptake of the existing knowledge in tourism?
Yeah, Sarah already gives some insights on that question. If it's not cost effective to the industry, they're not gonna implement it. It's always a challenging not to do science for science, but to do science for industry, and it's a totally different area. So you conduct the research, and when you start to do work for the industry, it's always difficult. For me, it was a difficult thing. And what to do? For example, I did it through projects, because projects do that gap between the academia and industry. For one project to be approved, you need to be connected to the industry. It's not the added value anymore; it's a mandatory. So it's a mandatory by the call of the project, and through that I implemented some things with the industry, but I don't know. I don't have like some formula how to stimulate or motivate the industry to uptake our knowledge we produce. I don't know.
All right, I was hoping you have the magic answer.
The magic word. I don't know. I don't have the formula. So it's so for example, sorry, Liz, I will. So what we do, for example, is the projects I was mentioning is the problem with communicating the results, for example. We are developing these doctrinal networks as the latest result of the IPCC is that climate change, we are at the point, we're not gonna stop it. It's gonna happen. We are at the point where there is no turning back. So there's a lot of research, for example, on the climate change, but we don't see the impact. It doesn't affect the behavioral change. It doesn't affect the policymakers. And so we are connecting, for example, the hard science with those transferable soft skills, how to communicate the results, how to sell yourself. So we're going to try to develop certain models to educate, for example, young scientists, how to sell their, let's say, research product to the industry. So we are venturing into that field, and it's a multidisciplinary team from climatologists, physics, computer sciences to linguists, communication scientists. Also, we have one faculty from the politics, how to conduct advocacy and such things. So it's a complex thing, how to sell something to the industry, how to make it interesting and appealing. So this is maybe one thing to do it, to develop some communication models, which might have an impact to them.
Thank you, Miroslav. Liz, you had an intervention?
Yes, I think it's easier to involve industry in education than it is in research. For a number of years now, I've been advocating industry education links and for people to set up industry liaison panels. This works in some places. It's worked very well in Budapest in Hungary, for example, but not in others. I think industry like to be involved in curriculum development. They're saying that we're not teaching the right things. So if you can invite them to help with curriculum development, this is very valuable. Also, I think I have done some consultancy for industry, which I've converted into research, but they prefer you to consult and collect data and then work on it yourself. They don't really want to be involved and then make a presentation. And then from that, I've developed research papers. I've also done this from student projects in industry. Currently in Manchester, we have the Manchester Hoteliers Association that works very closely with our university. And Adrian Ellis, who is the GM of one of the hotels, is a very strong mover in this context. And he invites the students into the hotel, and the people working in the hotel with Adrian take them around and lecture to them. Since we've had COVID, they've had webinars where the students have been involved. And this works really well, and they do practical sessions in the hotel also.
All right, thank you, Liz. Before I let you go, Sarah, Paul Sylvester says, hi, Sarah, good to meet you. Please, my research direction is on green economy. Is sustainable tourism overthrown?
Is it what?
Overthrown. This is what they say.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
Me neither. Let's ask Paul if he can explain himself better. Aine Hinsbeck says, maybe we academics focus too much on creation and not enough on co-creation. A kind of organic togetherness is needed. I guess I can agree with that. That was actually my aim. But anyway, if we get a question from Paul Sylvester, I might send it over to Sarah, and then she can answer that directly by email. So I don't get too much into your weekend, well-deserved weekend, Sarah, I guess, because Europeans will still have to move to the Friday. So I would really like to thank you all for taking your time. Liz, thank you for getting up earlier. Sarah, thank you for staying in your office longer than you've planned. I think it was a very nice discussion. Hopefully, we will elaborate soon on maybe new issues. I also wish to thank Miha for organizing and supporting this. Andrzej, thank you all also for your technical support. and also all the viewers on YouTube live stream, and also all others who will be watching this later on. Thank you for enriching the 25th anniversary of our faculty and reminding me how happy I am to be able to know you and to work with you. Enjoy your weekends and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.